Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for March 27th, 2023. On March 30th, there'll be the second session of the Summit for Democracy, which is the attempt by leading so-called Western countries to promote the idea of their democratic policies versus that of the autocracies. There are three themes to the conference coming up. The first one is strengthening democratic policies and countering authoritarianism. Secondly, fighting corruption. And third, promoting respect for human rights. The self-proclaimed defenders of democracy, led by the US, the United Kingdom, and the European nations, are actually demonstrating a contempt for democracy in the way they're dealing with the present financial and economic crisis. Governments are mobilizing to bail out speculators at the expense of the general public. Are you being given a vote on this? Now, the financial turmoil of the last couple of weeks is responsible for sleepless nights for bankers, financial authorities, regulators, and so on. Go back to the 2008 crisis. At that time, Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke rejected the proposals of Lyndon LaRouche and instead launched a $20+ trillion bailout scheme to keep brain-dead banks open. These were banks that were overflowing with non-fungible or non-performing assets, but they were allowed to keep those assets at face value by the flow of funds from the Federal Reserve into the banks, which could then bail out the corporations. This was called quantitative easing. Low interest credit from the Fed, and the loans were repeatedly rolled over. And this continued throughout the decade, and it was reprised again after the September 2019 crisis called the repo crisis, where banks refused to offer overnight loans to corporations that couldn't pay them back and had worthless paper they were putting up as collateral. So trillions of dollars, somewhere beyond 30 trillion, beyond $40 trillion, was pumped into the system. And nothing of value, of real value, tangible value, productive wealth was backing up these financial assets. What LaRouche drafted was a proposal to reorganize the financial system, starting with bankruptcy reorganization for the banks that were overloaded with these worthless debt instruments that could never be covered. He also called for a return to Glass-Steagall regulation so this wouldn't happen again, that commercial banks would not be allowed to engage in speculative investments with their depositors' funds. Along with that, he proposed, and this would have shut down the brain-dead system while issuing credit to the moribund physical economy. So no bailouts of speculators, but funds for investment in physical economy. Instead, the private bankers and the politicians they controlled, and by the way, the private bankers own the US Federal Reserve System, and the regulators they controlled did the opposite of LaRouche's proposal. They shut down the physical economy, the flow of credit into the physical economy, to keep the brain-dead banks open and the brainless speculators on life support. Anyone with an actual brain knew this wouldn't end well. And now we're seeing in the last weeks the effects of this. We have the inflation continuing. The anti-inflation policy of cutting off credit is leading to bankruptcies, and so they're now caught between the idea of do we inflate or do we deflate, collapse the system. We saw this with the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank. You have the ongoing saga of First Republic Bank, which is being bailed out by private banks organized by the Fed. You have the $100 billion+ bailout of Credit Suisse to enable the Union Bank of Switzerland to take it over. And we're seeing runs on deposits of small and regional banks, not to mention giant banks like Deutsche Bank in Germany. Now, as this whole process was unfolding, Moody's changed or downgraded the whole banking system from stable to negative. And yesterday, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, said that, quote, uncertainties are exceptionally high and risks to financial stability have increased, unquote. No kidding. You need the IMF director to tell you that? The only thing which is not uncertain is that the bankers and the politicians they finance have no answers. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, in her call for an emergency conference to deal with the crisis, said there are no solutions within the system. But all the proposed changes, including the Great Reset and the move to central bank digital currencies, are all within the system. They're designed to keep those in the financial and corporate cartels who call the shots in control, even as the real economy collapses and millions of lives are threatened. Let me give you 3 examples, or actually 4 examples, of this non-democratic approach, what might be called authoritarian approach when it comes to money. First, you have the Credit Suisse situation, then the decision to bail out Credit Suisse to enable Union Bank of Switzerland to take it over. Swiss law requires that Credit Suisse shareholders should vote on whether or not they want the merger to take place. Even with the massive bailout, it's likely that Credit Suisse shareholders would have voted against the merger. So what did they do? They rewrote the law. In other words, no vote was needed. Then let's look at France. Macron's measure on increasing the age before pensions can be taken. This is highly unpopular, bringing millions of people into the streets. When the vote was canceled in the National Assembly because it might not pass, Macron intervened to impose by decree that the pension reform goes into effect. Again, no vote. Then you have the situation in Germany with Deutsche Bank. The stock is collapsing. Why is that? Because Deutsche Bank is a leading derivatives trader, and there's question about the contagion. That is, as the collapse unfolds, the derivatives values are being lost, and this could start a chain reaction collapse of the derivatives market. Will the German government bail it out? Well, Schultz said action will be taken to protect it, even as they say it's strong and robust. You can be sure there'll be no vote on a Deutsche Bank bailout in Germany. Finally, on U.S. banks, there are emergency meetings every single weekend now. And what was decided was unlimited dollar swaps would be made available to expand the and an expansion of the emergency lending facilities of the Fed. This includes funds that will go to non-U.S. central banks the same way it did after 2008. Did you vote for this? Are you being asked to vote for it? And similarly, did you vote on the $100+ billion pledge to Ukraine for weapons to fight the war against Russia? So let's go back to the narrative of democracy versus autocracy. The so-called autocrats, that is, the countries that are being attacked in these conferences, are ones that don't favor speculation. They're moving away from the dollar system because they know it's a system of so-called rules which refuse to allow sovereign nations to protect their economy and the life support of their populations. So they're voting against it, and they're called autocratic. Meanwhile, with the deepening financial crisis, the West is being exposed as the actual autocrats because the financial oligarchs are controlling the policies of the so-called democratic West. I wonder if this paradox will be discussed at the upcoming Summit for Democracy. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back again tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and weekly magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.